J.P. Morgan, the Colossus of American Finance. In the annals of American capitalism, no figure looms larger than John Pierpont Morgan, the financier who didn't just shape Wall Street, but effectively served as the nation's shadow central banker for nearly half a century. At the height of his power in the early 1900s, Morgan controlled an empire spanning railroads, steel, electricity, and banking that collectively represented over 40% of America's industrial might. His private library on Madison Avenue became the unofficial seat of financial power. Chapter 1. The Making of a Financial Prodigy. John Pierpont. Morgan's path to becoming America's preeminent financier began under unlikely circumstances. Born in 1837 to Junius Spencer Morgan, a successful Hartford banker, young JP suffered from a host of childhood ailments, including rheumatic fever, seizures, and debilitating migraines that often left him bedridden for weeks at a time. His father's solution to these health problems was as brutal as it was formative. At age 15, Morgan was shipped alone to the Azores Islands, where he spent nearly a year convalescing in isolation. This experience forged two defining traits that would characterize his entire career: an almost monastic self-reliance and an unshakable belief in his own judgment. After education in Switzerland and Germany, Morgan entered the financial world through his father's London-based banking firm in 1857. His early career revealed both his precocious talent and his appetite for risk. During a business trip to New Orleans in 1859, the 22-year-old Morgan impulsively used company funds to purchase an entire shipload of Brazilian coffee that had arrived without a buyer, flipping it for a 600% profit in a matter of days. While his superiors were aghast at the recklessness, the episode demonstrated Morgan's lifelong philosophy that true opportunities only came to those willing to act decisively when others hesitated. Personal tragedy struck in 1861 when Morgan's beloved first wife, Amelia Sturgis, died of tuberculosis just 4 months after their wedding. The loss devastated Morgan, who threw himself into work with even greater intensity. As the Civil War raged, Morgan, like many wealthy Northerners, paid $300 for a substitute to take his place in the Union Army, a common and legal practice at the time. But far from sitting out the conflict, Morgan turned the war into a business opportunity through controversial deals like the Hall Carbine affair, where he financed the repurchase and resale of defective rifles to the government at a massive markup. While critics called this war profiteering, Morgan saw it simply as smart business, an early example of his belief that financial logic transcended moral considerations. Chapter 2. The Railroad King, 1871 to 1901. The post-Civil War era presented Morgan with his defining opportunity: the chaotic, hyper-competitive American railroad industry. By the 1870s, the country had over 300 competing railroad companies engaged in cutthroat price wars that left many lines bankrupt or barely solvent. Where others saw chaos, Morgan saw opportunity for what he called rationalization, his process of forcing consolidation through financial pressure. Morgan's strategy was ruthlessly effective. First, he would provide loans to struggling railroads at punishing interest rates. When they inevitably defaulted, he would seize control of their boards and install his own managers. Finally, he would merge competing lines into regional monopolies that could dictate prices. This process, dubbed Morganization by contemporaries, allowed Morgan to gain control of 1/3 of America's rail lines by 1900, including crown jewels like the New York Central and Northern Pacific Railroads. The scale of Morgan's railroad operations was staggering. His 1885 brokering of a peace deal between the New York Central and Pennsylvania Railroads effectively ended years of destructive competition between the two largest eastern lines. In 1889, he orchestrated the $40 million financing of the Northern Pacific Railroad, then the largest bond offering in U.S. history. By the turn of the century, Morgan-controlled railroads employed over 100,000 workers and carried more freight than the entire British railway system. But Morgan's dominance bred powerful enemies. When President Theodore Roosevelt's administration sued to break up Morgan's Northern Securities Railroad Holding Company, in 1902 under antitrust laws, it marked the first major challenge to Morgan's empire. The legal battle revealed Morgan's astonishing view of his own authority. He reportedly told Roosevelt's attorney general, "If we have done anything wrong, send your man to my man and they can fix it." The Supreme Court ultimately ruled against Morgan in 1904, forcing the dissolution of Northern Securities. Yet even this setback only temporarily slowed Morgan's consolidation of American industry. Chapter 3. Building the Modern Corporation. Morgan's greatest industrial achievement came in 1901 with the creation of U.S. Steel, the world's first billion-dollar corporation and the apex of his philosophy of industrial consolidation. The genesis of this colossus lay in Morgan's recognition that Andrew Carnegie, the dominant figure in steel production, was looking to retire. In a legendary meeting at New York's Waldorf Astoria Hotel, Carnegie scribbled his asking price for Carnegie Steel on a slip of paper: $480 million, approximately $17 billion today. Morgan glanced at the figure and uttered just two words: "I accept." The resulting merger was unprecedented in scale and scope. Morgan combined Carnegie Steel with Federal Steel and several other competitors to form U.S. Steel, a vertically integrated giant that controlled 60% of America's steel production capacity, vast iron ore and coal reserves, over 1,000 miles of railroad, a fleet of Great Lakes steamships, with a market capitalization of $1.4 billion, nearly 15% of the entire U.S. GDP at the time. U.S. Steel exemplified Morgan's vision of order in industry, replacing competition with consolidation and instability with steady dividends for investors like himself. Morgan applied similar strategies across industries. Chapter 4. The Man Who Saved Capitalism. Morgan's most astonishing displays of power came during two catastrophic financial panics when he essentially functioned as America's central bank, because no formal one existed yet. During the Panic of 1893, as gold drained from U.S. reserves and the government faced default, Morgan engineered a secret bailout. He formed a European syndicate to supply gold to the Treasury in exchange for 30-year bonds paying 4% interest. When President Cleveland hesitated, Morgan allegedly told him, "You have nothing to propose? Then I will." The deal stabilized the dollar while netting Morgan's group $18 million in profit, over $650 million today. The Panic of 1907 provided an even more dramatic demonstration of Morgan's power. As banks collapsed and crowds formed to withdraw savings, the 70-year-old Morgan, suffering from a terrible cold, summoned New York's leading financiers to his library. Over 3 days, he personally reviewed the books of failing institutions to decide which to save forced rival bankers to pool $25 million to prop up the system. Literally locked attendees in his library overnight until they agreed to terms. When the Trust Company of America neared collapse, Morgan dictated its rescue by simply declaring, "This is the place to stop the trouble." His actions stemmed the panic, but also revealed the dangerous dependence of the U.S. economy on one private citizen, directly leading to creation of the Federal Reserve System in 1913. Chapter 5. Legacy and Paradox. Morgan's final years saw his public image tarnished by the 1912 Pujo Committee hearings, which revealed the staggering scope of his money trust, including control of 341 corporate directorships worth $22 billion, nearly $600 billion today. The hearings exposed how Morgan's interlocking financial interests dominated American industry, prompting him to famously testify, "The first thing is character, before money or anything else." When Morgan died in Rome in 1913, his estate was valued at just $80 million, about $2.3 billion today, a surprisingly modest sum given his influence. This paradox reflected Morgan's complex character. Though he built industrial behemoths, he saw himself first as a banker, not an owner. His true legacy was institutional. The story of JPMorgan reveals how finance can become a form of private governance. Today, as a handful of tech billionaires and asset managers control unprecedented wealth and influence, we must ask, are we witnessing the rise of new money trusts? Subscribe to Fraud and Fortune as we investigate the modern equivalents of Morgan's empire, from BlackRock's $10 trillion in assets to the shadow banking system that controls global credit. The players have changed, but the game remains the same.